Did they fumble the two timeline play, or was it delusional, flawed, or greedy to begin with? I think it's a little bit of both, but mostly on the latter. Welcome back to the Kenny Beecham podcast, y'all. I'm super excited for today's episode. We got a lot of great dialogue revolving around the game of basketball. Before we get into it, I'm going to remind you to leave a like, subscribe, give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. It goes a very long way. On the last episode, I mentioned that the Kenny Beecham podcast is under the Enjoy Sports Podcast Network, and a lot of y'all were questioning, Kenny, what does that mean for us, the viewers, the listeners? The reality is, doesn't mean a damn thing for you. but I'm just saying that your boy owns all of the content that he's a part of, which is just a dope feeling. And yeah, I just want to let the world know that this is ours. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Now, there's a lot of stuff we want to talk about today. The main topic, the biggest topic, is the Golden State Warriors. Now, I want to say right off rip, I am filming this episode during the beginning of the second quarter of the Raptors versus Warriors. Hell, it is in front of me right now. I mean, I'm not watching, but I'm keeping track of the score, basically. So whatever I talk about in today's episode, it won't cover this game versus the Raptors, but I did just drop a tweet, and this is why you should follow me on Twitter if you don't already. Jokingly, I'm a Twitter guy that's like, jokes are a lot better than spitting facts on Twitter, right? You know what I'm saying? It's just for that medium, that form of social media, I'm most likely gonna be joking, and I hope that most people recognize that. But I tweeted, Pascal Siakam is playing very well in his Golden State Warrior tryout, because he's a guy that's maybe getting traded, and they're a team that definitely needs some trades. But I want to back up a little bit, because this was a tough week, I would assume, if you're a Warriors fan. Now, Sometimes I get a little what I don't even know the word I'm looking for, envious or disturbed a little bit with the Golden State Warriors fan base, because you have a week like today where things go wrong, like really, really wrong. And you would have thought the Warriors fans forgot the fact that they won 4 championships within the last 10 years. Now, I'm not saying you should just still be smiling about a championship from 2 years ago, but still, some of us have yet to see our favorite team win. I'm not saying you can't be upset with the way things are going, but acting like the world is on fire is just a little bit different for a team that has been the pillar of success for the last 10 or so seasons. You feel me? But let's take a step back. This is a bad week. It's not the worst week in the last 2 years for the Warriors. I would say that's the Draymond Green fight. Can't call it a fight if only one man throw a punch. The Draymond Green thing with Jordan Poole's probably the worst week. And then the week that's probably second is Draymond stepping on Sabonis. I don't know how we're going to rank them, but this week is up there as far as really bad weeks. It starts off, you're going against the defending champion Denver Nuggets, and you are up by 18 points with 6 minutes to go in the game. Now, traditionally, when you're up by that many points with that little amount of time, you might as well call it a win. I should have went on ESPN to look at their win probability. I would guess that it was probably in the 90s, right? They blow the game. You know what? You want to know the crazy part about it is that for the most part, they were playing good basketball to those last 6 minutes. The third quarter definitely reminded me of old Warriors teams where it's like, we're going to come out in the third quarter, we're going to step on your neck, and when the fourth quarter come around, we can kind of coast because we just went crazy. There was times in the Steph Curry era where we get to the third quarter, Steph hits a 3, and that 3 feels like it's worth 8 points. Because it was demoralizing and it was just all of these different kind of things, right? That was the type of energy they were playing in that third quarter. I'm like, okay, things are looking good. And then we get to the last 6 minutes of the game and they struggle so heavily. They attempt one shot within 10 feet of the rim for the last 6 minutes, and then the Denver Nuggets showed the world, like, hell, we should probably still be the favorite to win the championship. Aaron Gordon has a magnificent fourth quarter. Peyton Watson off the bench because Michael Porter Jr. wasn't playing his best game. Peyton Watson was doing great stuff on both sides of the ball. He's become, a 38% three-point shooter in the corners. So, like, he had been having a good game, and then obviously it was topped off by the three-point shot by Jokic, half-court heave, and that was the most amount of emotion I've ever seen. He showed some more emotion on this random regular season game winner. Now, granted, it was a crazy, crazy game winner, the best of the season so far, but he showed more emotion on that one play than we saw the entire championship run, which is just kind of cool to see Jokic in the element of, like, I just did something super crazy, because the brother's regularly doing crazy stuff. He's just like, well, sometimes the shot go in, sometimes it doesn't. Like, that's his mentality in most cases. But this time it felt like and this is different scales, obviously, because one of them was to go to the next round, and one of them was a random regular season game in the middle of the season. But when Kawhi Leonard hit the shot against the 76ers, we had never really seen Kawhi show that much emotion, and then we also just got that from Jokic. But anyway, instead of the conversation revolving around how Jokic and the Denver Nuggets really took over this game to win it, it's flipped to like, damn, the Warriors are sub 500, huh? Hold on, what's going on with these Warriors? Now, they ain't been pretty all season long, but like a game like this is really eye-opening. So we sleep on it, right? We sleep on it. In my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna sleep on it. I might make a video about it the next morning. The next morning comes around, and then things get worse. Here's a report from Shams Charania. After sitting the final 18 minutes of the Nuggets' loss, Warriors forward Jonathan Kuminga has lost faith in Steve Kerr and no longer believes that Kerr will allow him to reach his full potential. Hey, listen. If you watch this game, you know that Jonathan Kuminga was phenomenal in the minutes that he played. He scored, 16 points in 19 minutes. And then, like Shams mentioned here, for the last 18 minutes of the game, he did not touch the floor. He was sitting on the bench with a towel around his neck, watching his team implode. And Steve Kerr, of course, was asked about it in the post-game interview, and he said that, hell, Wiggins was having a great time. And usually when Jonathan Kuminga comes to the game, the Warriors were already rolling, so they decided to keep the shift because Kuminga had already sat too long. Rationalization doesn't make sense to me because there was also a lineup change where we saw Chris Paul come into the game, and then we also saw Trace Jackson Davis come into the game too. So there was an opportunity for that shift change that he said that it didn't really happen. There was an opportunity for Kuminga, but this one just, not that it came out of left field, but it's rare that you see a player of Kuminga's caliber, which is like a young player with a lot of potential / a really good role player in the current NBA, vocally say to like, man, I'm not feeling great, especially when you talk about the team that he's a part of. But I understand. Do I agree with the fact that you have to go to Shams Charania or whoever in the media to get your point across? No, but who knows? Behind the scenes, the man could have been talking to Steve Kerr for the last season and a half or whatever. And he's like, hell, I've done everything I can. Let's go to the media. And then an hour after Kuminga dropped his, Moses Moody was like, me too. I'm also upset. So now we see the youth movement of the Warriors upset. The first version of the youth movement, because there's a second version of the youth movement going on right now with Brandon Podziemski, whose name I've heard a million times at this point. I still don't know how to pronounce it. And then Trace Jackson Davis are both like either starting or in the top end of the rotation, while the first group of the youth movement is outside of the rotation and or starting games, but also only playing 15 to 20 minutes. So it's very interesting, and I was going to talk about it regardless, but producer Greg came to the table in the text and said, hey, did the Warriors fumble the two-timeline play / youth movement, or was it flawed, delusional, and greedy to begin with? And I love this because producer Greg is a Warriors fan through and through. When we were interviewing him, a little side note, he let us know very early on that he wasn't a bandwagon Warriors fan, and I took his word for it. So he ain't get here when they were 7-2-9, when they was getting that last win versus the Grizzlies, but he been there for some time. And he's trying to figure out where I sit on this. And I think this is a very good question. Did they fumble the two timelines, or was it delusional / greedy to begin with? I think we have to take a full step back and kind of think about what exactly the Warriors' plan was originally. Now, here's the idea. And the 2019 finals, Klay Thompson goes down with his injuries. And man, I hated that moment watching it as a neutral NBA fan because I was ready for a very great series. Obviously, it wasn't that because Klay Thompson goes down and Kevin Durant goes down. It's like, okay, I'm not discrediting the Raptors championship because a ring is a ring. You can only play the people in front of you. But as far as like the anticipation of watching KD again in the finals, we didn't get that, at least a big part of that. So KD leaves in the offseason. But a part of KD leaving was him going to the Nets and the Nets saying, hey, we'll take on KD. We'll give you D'Angelo Russell. And now the Warriors are like, okay, we just lost one of the greatest players of all time, but it sucks, obviously, but we kind of saw the writing on the wall. Draymond Green and him got into it in that one random regular season game. We kind of knew that he was going to be leaving, but at least we didn't lose him for nothing. And they got back D'Angelo Russell. And in a moment, I'm like, okay, again, considering the circumstances, there's nothing you can really get for Kevin Durant that's going to be Kevin Durant, you know? But considering you didn't lose him for nothing, which we've seen teams do when LeBron James walked away from Cleveland, they didn't get anything in return. So getting back anything was a dub. But not only did they get a person back, they got D'Angelo Russell, who in this timeline, if you remember correctly, was an all-star the previous year. So we traded away an all-NBA MVP, perennial MVP candidate for an all-star. Not too bad. Now, originally, they might have thought in their mind, because we're going to have Clay back, because we, of course, have Steph Curry, the goal is to flip D'Angelo Russell anyway, but at least we have an asset that we can attach to him. And, well, they eventually did. They eventually did trade D'Angelo Russell, but their opening lineup was Steph Curry, D'Angelo Russell, Glenn Robinson III, Draymond Green, and Kevon Looney. Crazy. 5 games to the NBA season, Steph Curry breaks his hand, and they finish the season 15-50. They end up trading D'Angelo Russell to Minnesota for a pick and Wiggins, which again, the Warriors under Bob Myers have a few fleecings like this. This is one. D'Angelo Russell never got back to his all-star form, and even now we're still wondering who D'Angelo Russell is as a player. You got back Wiggins, who turned into an NBA all-star at one point. And I think when it's all said and done for Wiggins, we're going to look back on his career and be like, what the hell happened? He went from just a guy that a lot of people considered empty stats on bad teams to going to a good infrastructure team and then buying into a role, making an all-star appearance, being the second best player on an NBA championship team. And then now I'm hoping this is not the way the rest of his career is going to look, but he's awful. I'm only comparing him to him. This is the worst version of Wiggins we've ever seen. Shoot, a high school version of Wiggins is probably better than the Wiggins we got right now. Just if we're going to look back on his career and be like, man, he had 7 different versions of himself. Either way, they get back Wiggins in the pick. Now, the pick ends up being Kuminga. When they went 15-50 that season, they go and get the second overall pick that, of course, is Wiseman, and then they also gave Moses Moody in another in the same draft class with Kuminga. Now, was it flawed to begin with, or did they fumble? That is the original question. Now, I went back into the archives. That's one of my favorite things about this podcast, that it allows me to kind of go back, relive some parts of history, read old articles and things like that. Zach Lowe of ESPN, a couple days before the NBA draft that had the number 2 overall pick that ended up being Wiseman. I want to remind you, this is the year that Anthony Edwards went first, Wiseman was second, LaMelo, and then Patrick Williams. 2 of those are not like the other. This is Zach Lowe's reporting. Rarely have the number 1 and number 2 picks gone to teams in various win-now stages. Both Minnesota and the Golden State Warriors have explored trading their picks for all NBA-level stars, sources say. But no such deal appears for now to likely materialize. The Wizards have shown no interest in trading Beal for either picks. Pause. The Wizards? This is a part of history that I do not remember. The Wizards got offered the first overall pick that ended up being Anthony Edwards for Bradley Beal, and they was like, we'd rather win 37 games. We'd rather win 37 games. Mind-blowing to me. The other part of this, the Suns weren't interested in trading Devin Booker. Makes sense. Devin Booker's one of the best players in the league. You look back on that and say W for the Suns because they were in a weird spot themselves. And the last one, the 76ers were not willing to part ways with Ben Simmons. Whew. Obviously, at that time, Ben Simmons was an all-NBA player. Nowadays, not so much. So, in this draft class, they explored the options. And the market said, hell, that number 2 overall pick is not as valuable as you think. You want an all-NBA caliber player, we can't really give you that. So instead, they decide to draft with the pick. They draft a player that they believe is the best player available. If you ask Bob Myers, he didn't think about fit. He didn't think about them having a rim runner, rim protector guy, like a lot of people are saying. He said in all of his interviews that throughout the drafting process this year and then the Kuminga/Moses Moody year, their objective was to draft the best player available regardless of fit. And that is what they thought they were doing when they drafted James Wiseman. And then James Wiseman gets to the Golden State Warriors after having a year in Memphis where he didn't play much because of some eligibility / taking whatever, college stuff, right? And it does not look good. And one thing we've learned about the Golden State Warriors, and this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later when I get to the rumors in the later part of the show, is that because of the way they play their brand of basketball, there are a specific caliber of players that do not and will not fit. We saw D'Angelo Russell not really fit. Again, he didn't get a chance to play alongside Klay Thompson and much of Steph Curry, considering it was only 5 games. But considering how intricate their offense can be when it's rolling, there are certain players that cannot get it. If you are not cerebral enough to make a read, then you cannot play. Wiseman, one of those players. D'Angelo Russell became one of those players. Kelly Oubre became one of those players. And then in the early stages of Jonathan Kuminga, he was one of those players. And now it's kind of simmering down. I still watch a lot of Jonathan Kuminga and wish that he would slow down just a little bit to take an extra second to look at what's going on ahead of him. But he's such a superior athlete that he makes the rest work. Anyway, they tried. They tried to make the win now trades, but ultimately decided to draft. So the question is, I get back to it. Did they fumble the 2 timeline play, or was it delusional, flawed, or greedy to begin with? I think it's a little bit of both, but mostly on the latter, because it made me go down again a rabbit hole trying to figure out, this is a very unique circumstances, right? Where you have a team that is either coming off a championship or in championship contention that end up getting 3 lottery picks. This is different. 3 lottery picks in the span of 2 years, right? And their idea was to let both coexist so we could ride into the sunset of Steph Curry's career while Jordan Poole, Jonathan Kuminga, James Wiseman are now stepping up. So I went back through our history, and y'all let me know in the comment section and or hit me up on X and let me know if I'm missing some people. I'm thinking of teams throughout history that have been able to manage the 2 timeline thing. And I do want to say the Warriors are down by 25 points in the first half right now. So it's not looking great still. The first one that comes to mind is Kawhi Leonard, drafted to the San Antonio Spurs. When he was drafted, obviously he was a part of a trade that had Jordan Hill go to the Pacers in exchange for that pick. But Tony Parker was 28, Manu Ginobili was 33, and Tim Duncan was 34. So this was an older team that just come off 61 wins. They bring in Kawhi Leonard, give him a year where he was, I think Kawhi Leonard ended 4th in Rookie of the Year. So it's not like nobody saw that he could be really, really good. But the first year he went from coming off the bench to winning a starting spot. And then the second year they're making a deep run, I think, to the conference finals. And the year after that, they win a championship. And he becomes eventually the guy that is winning a finals MVP. Now, obviously, things didn't go great there. By the age of 26, he had already tried to dip out to his next team. But as far as getting the timeline right, they won 2 championships with Kawhi Leonard as their starting small forward as a youngin, while having these aging players that are still damn good. But it's very similar to the Golden State Warriors, you know? So that's the first one. The second one is also the Spurs. It's a little bit before my time, so my history might not be amazing here, but it's with Tim Duncan. And you're going to see something that all of these 2 timeline things have in common that the Warriors did not have the luxury of having. Tim Duncan came to the Spurs where David Robinson and Avery Johnson were 32 years old. Both of them were 32 years old. It was a team that had been in the playoffs multiple years before that. Robinson's out with an injury. They tank. Tim Duncan is a generational talent. They win the lottery. Boom. Tim Duncan comes in, starts every single game that season that he plays, makes rookie teams, Rookie of the Year. He was phenomenal. He's one of the greatest players of all time. The next one that comes to mind is a young Kobe Bean Bryant, where the Hornets draft this high school kid out of Lower Merion, and they trade Vlade Divac in order to get him. And now you got this Lakers team that was solid before, regularly above 500 team, and they usher in a guy like Kobe, and eventually Kobe and Shaq, who's older than him by I think 6 years or so, are winning NBA championships. And then the last one is a more recent one. It's the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown timeline alongside Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving, etc. Now, Gordon Hayward recently went on Podcast Pete and talked about all of this stuff, where he said when he ended up in Boston, Danny Ainge had told him that their goal is to have Kyrie and Gordon Hayward carry for the first 2 to 3 years, and then eventually let Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown take over the reins of the team. Now, what happened in their scenario is Gordon Hayward goes down with a freak accident in the first game of the season. Kyrie Irving also has a bunch of injuries. So now this idea of waiting 2 to 3 years to put Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown into these situations, that timeline is accelerated, and both of them are playing huge minutes on a team that's trying to make it to the NBA Finals. That's going toe-to-toe with LeBron James. So now we look at those 4 teams that had the timeline things, the 2 timeline things. What are you noticing? Kawhi Leonard's one of the greatest players of all time. And Tim Duncan is one of the greatest players of all time. Kobe Bean Bryant is one of the greatest players of all time. Tatum is on the way to becoming a guy that we can say, when NBA Top 100 comes out in 23 years from now, Jason Tatum's name should probably be there. I don't know if he's going to have a championship. I don't know. But what you'll see of all of these 4 is that the young talent that you're bringing in is an all-NBA talent / a NBA Hall of Famer. And what the Warriors missed out on is drafting that player or developing that player. Because nobody drafted Kawhi Leonard thinking that guy was going to make the Hall of Fame one day. They didn't. That situation is as close to the current Warriors as possible because Kuminga / Moses Moody, they were not high lottery picks. Well, Kuminga's, I think, 7. So, like, they're not like a top 5 pick. Again, Tim Duncan is number 1. Tatum is in the top 3. Kobe was 13th or so. But Kawhi Leonard has the best parallel here where you thought that, okay, let's say it's Kuminga because he was a 7th overall pick, or Wiseman because he was number 2, that we're going to allow this man to develop a little bit. And then by year 2, he's our starter at that position. And then by year 4, he might be the guy that's leading the team. Didn't happen that way. And part of that is bad drafting and bad development of this young talent. One of the problems is that when you have a guy like Steve Kerr in the team that is Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, there is no room for error for the young players. If Kuminga / Moody / Wiseman, when he was there, had a 2-minute stretch where it wasn't good, they didn't have the luxury of that long leash to play through their mistakes because we are trying to win a championship. And they did that. They got them one during the 2 timeline era. But look at the players. Look at the young players. They weren't really contributing like that. Jordan Poole had some moments in the playoffs, but look at his finals numbers. Look at Kuminga's. Those guys did not play a huge part. It was the core guys. It was Curry. It was Dre. It was Clay. It was Wiggs. It was Loon Dog. It was those dudes more than anything versus the young guys. So though they technically did get it done with having a championship during that timeline, it wasn't what you thought. So the question is, again, did the Warriors fumble the 2 timeline play or movement, or was it flawed, delusional, greedy to begin with? I believe that it was more flawed, delusional, and greedy than it was them failing it, because more likely than not, the idea of it is just not going to work. Now, you could go back throughout the history and say, oh my God, they drafted this player over this player. They drafted this, like obviously LaMelo Ball was sitting right there at number 3. LaMelo Ball on this team, that is the type of guy that could help. We've seen a little bit now, well, I guess not now because Chris Paul is injured, but when we added another playmaker to the team with Steph Curry, how decent it can really look. Or you could talk about some people that was later in that draft class. I mean, it's a lot of guys that dropped in the actual thing that could have been helping. There was also reports that they were trying to move the Wiseman and I'm sorry, not the Wiseman, the Kuminga and the Moses Moody picks, but nothing materialized. And that was the moment. If you listen to our other podcast before this one existed, when we found out that they had the 7th pick and the 14th pick, I think Moses Moody was, that was when I was like, it is time for them to buy, because we had just saw them not buy the previous year, and Wiseman's rookie season was dreadful. So it's like, you cannot afford it again. Again, luckily they did win another championship, but I felt as though there was an opportunity there to consolidate those draft picks. And at that time, they also did had a big trade exception that they could have brought in some talent. Pascal Siakam was linked to him then. Again, I'm going through old articles at this time, and it never materialized. And now we get to the point now where, again, Kuminga is unhappy, Wiseman is out the door, and Moses Moody is unhappy as well. When it rains, it pours. Because that's not the end of it. Because in their last game, we found out that Chris Paul broke his hand. He's going to be out 4 to 6, I think it was, which is a good timeline. That was a lot. I never really know with hand injuries because we don't know where he broke his hand. Remember, Steph Curry broke his hand and he was out from game 5 of the season to 82. Now, granted, they were also 15 wins and 50 losses, so we weren't rushing to get Steph Curry back. But you know what I was thinking about recently, all dealing with this? We saw a season where we only got 5 Steph Curry games. And I was thinking, it better be worth it. What you tanking for, it better be worth it. And it wasn't. It didn't end up being worth it. But yeah, Chris Paul is out. And I would not be surprised. Obviously, I don't have sources. And one day I will. I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen the last Chris Paul minute with the Golden State Warriors. I honestly think that the injury makes it kind of easy for Mike Dunleavy to do the next thing. Because the question was A, are they going to make some decisions? And I've seen some conflicting reports / people trying to speculate what's going to happen. But more likely than not, I feel like the Warriors are going to make some really big decisions as we get closer and closer to the end of their big 3. And you wondered, is it Clay? Is it Wiggs? Is it Chris Paul? Who do you prioritize getting out the door? I mean, when you think about what Chris Paul has added to the team this season, the numbers are saying that when Chris Paul is running with that second unit, they're good. It still is that way. Now, and it ain't as great as week 1 or month 1 of the NBA season, but it's still pretty good. But now you have a player on your roster for the next 4 to 6 weeks that cannot contribute at all. Makes it a lot easier to make that decision. Now, 4 to 6 weeks from now puts us around the trade deadline. So we'll see exactly how they perform in this time being. But his contract with a Moses Moody or a Kuminga, again, or both of them, that's enough money to go out there and get some real talent. They also have some draft capital. I would not be surprised if we've seen our last Chris Paul minutes with the Golden State Warriors. And my real prediction is that he gets traded to another team, and we'll talk about what that team could be in a minute here. He gets traded to another team, and that other team may not really be interested in his services. He gets bought out, and that man ends up in LA. That's what he ends up not the Clippers. The Clippers got their point guard, and they're looking damn good. And I still don't know how to gauge the Clippers other than the fact that they're really good. He ends up with the Lakers. They have another 39-year-old player on the roster. Because they just need more playmaking and stuff. And, you know, he signs there for a minimum. Him and LeBron James are finally done because LeBron has played with he's played with Melo, he's played with Wade, and Chris Paul's the last domino to fall. It has to happen. That's my prediction. I don't know what team that is, but that's what I kind of see. So a rough week for the Golden State Warriors, but the conversation is fluid. You let me know in the comment section. Did the Warriors fumble the 2 timeline thing, or was it delusional to start off with? Now I want to get into some NBA rumors. Again, we're getting closer and closer to the trade deadline, and as a self-proclaimed internet general manager, I really like this time of the year where we get trades and we get rumors, and it's always super fun to see whose names pop up. So let's get into it. The first one, the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors are 2 teams to monitor for Zach LaVine's market. Now, do I necessarily believe this? Not so much, but it gives me an opportunity to talk about the Kings a little bit more because they do not look great. Now, they look good. Honestly, I think their record, I think they're better than what their record is showing, but it's still not good enough. And they are in conversations for Pascal Siakam for about an hour and a half before Sham said that was dead. But this is a team that I believe is going to be very, very active on the market. And I believe that the Pascal Siakam thing fell through for 1 or 2 reasons. The first reason is that they were not willing to give up Keegan Murray, which of course not. Keegan Murray's a stud. I wouldn't give him up for majority. I mean, Keegan Murray's one of those guys that, like, you're not untouchable because nobody in the league should be untouchable, but you as close to untouchable as a young talent can be without being Luka. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think they were thinking about trading him. Or the option 2 was that they couldn't convince Pascal that after the season to stick around. Because that's the big thing. Whoever trades for Pascal, they're giving up assets and stuff because Pascal is actively a really good player, but you also have to try to convince him to stick around. And that's why I like Pascal for the Warriors, because I do believe that you could convince him to stay in San Francisco. Do they need a guy like Pascal? You know, like considering with Draymond and then Trace Jackson Davis coming into himself. I don't know. I think they maybe need another creator. Pascal Siakam can be that. Either way, the Kings just need something. They need to be ultra aggressive. And I don't mean in the sense that they need to be trading Keegan again or the top 3 guys, Fox, Keegan, Sabonis, safe. Everything else on the roster should be up for grabs potentially. They gave up a first-round pick to get Kevin Huerter on the team a couple offseasons ago. And last year, it looked brilliant. Kevin Huerter came into the year, and he was one of the most improved players in across the association. He was hitting the 3 at an all-time clip. The dribble handoffs between him and Domantas Sabonis, 2-man game was amazing. You got to see a full potential version of himself. And this year, he has completely lost his starting spot to Chris Duarte, which is something that was not on my bingo card, where he is not nearly as efficient as the year before. And almost all the numbers are saying like, it's been a really rough year for him. And because of that, him, Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell, who's back in the rotation a little bit, which I'm monitoring. We'll see what that's about. They're a team that should be out there calling. Now, because they gave up that first-round pick to Kevin Huerter, their draft capital is kind of constricted right now as far as what they can send out in the trade without giving up the protections on some of those picks. I'm not a cap expert, but that was just something I read this morning. But either way, they're a team that should be ultra-aggressive. And Zach LaVine is an interesting case for them. I don't love the fit between them because that is them completely buying into on all offense. And though I think it could work, it's just not brilliant to be paying 3 different players $35 to $40+ million annually when you're not, that team does not, that trade does not make them a contender. I mean, well, a favorite. You know what I'm saying? Hypothetically, that trade would be Huerter, Barnes, Mitchell. I'm not even thinking about draft capital. I don't even give a damn about no draft capital as a Bulls fan at the moment. I'm just saying, like, if that's the trade that happens, you're constricting your depth, obviously, and now it's tougher, at least. And I don't think it's a very smart move for them to go get Zach LaVine. And that's the dilemma for most teams with Zach LaVine. $40 million, a lot of money for somebody that you're not paying to be number one or number two. So who's going to bite the bullet? Somebody will. I'm pretty sure of it. Somebody will. I just don't know who it will be. A report from Chris Hayes. I do believe DeJounte Murray will likely be traded by deadline. That's my belief. Now, this is a rumor, of course. This is me talking about rumors. Anytime I hear Chris Hayes talk about a clutch client, I'm taking it as gospel. Because he's got the few relationships that I believe in 100%. Him and Damian Lillard like this. Him and Clutch like this. So DeJounte Murray being a clutch client, I'm damn sure that this is not just his belief. This is stuff he's hearing. This stuff he's hearing. I'm not tied in, but I done heard some stuff too. And that makes me think, who is going to be the DeJounte Murray team? Because the Hawks obviously need to make some decision. When you have your top two players and your net rating with your top two players on the court is not over 2, it's probably time to break up that pair. And they gave it a little bit of a time, and it's just time to let it go. The question is, what teams will be interested in DeJounte Murray's services? Now, the reason I like DeJounte Murray is because his contract feels very great for his production. You know, he just signed an extension, and it wasn't like a max extension. He's making a smooth $25 million annually, which feels really good. Now, the problem is, and this could be a Trae Young thing or it could be a DeJounte thing. I still haven't figured that out. But based on my eyes, it feels as though DeJounte is a player that needs the ball in his hands more times than not. I don't know if that's just because Trae Young is so dominant that it feels that way, or it's because, like, genuinely it's time for DeJounte to be that lead guard again. And if you look across the association of teams that might be interested, a lot of those teams are not giving DeJounte Murray lead guard duties. Unless it's the LA Lakers. Because you slide him in your point guard, you feel good. I'm just saying. Now, what do the Atlanta Hawks think in return as far as assets go? I don't know. I don't think they're selling DeJounte Murray. I think they're trying to do a very similar trade on different calibers, obviously, than what the Knicks and the Raptors just did. It was like, hell, we're both going to walk out of there with real NBA players. Don't give me some 7th grader, some pick that's for 2029. Like, I want players back right now because we still do have Trae Young, who's having a phenomenal season. We're not trying to take a huge step back. So I don't know what the team looks like. I don't know what the trade looks like. But DeJounte Murray, if Chris Hayes is saying that he believes he's going to get traded, I believe that he's getting traded too. From James Edward III, the Detroit Pistons are expected to trade for a few veterans to right the ship. Detroit will make a trade before February 8th. I bet good money on it. My feeling is that the Pistons will bring in a veteran or two in attempts to try to right the ship down the stretch, but I haven't heard about anything being close to done or on the table as of now. I understand why you do this. I understand why you do this. You do not want to go down as the worst team in NBA history. You just don't want that title. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think there's a single veteran on the market that's going to be like, oh, now we're a 20-win team. This team is bad. They're really bad. And there's been a couple games recently. They were just in a game with the Golden State Warriors, and Steph Curry hit a good look away 3 and bang, it was over with. But they're very close to winning a bunch of games. They just have one of the worst clutch time offenses in basketball. So it's like, and defenses, I guess. It's like maybe a veteran can help us out. I made a tweet about it like, man, imagine finding out you're getting traded to the Pistons right now. Nothing against Detroit. I've been to Detroit. It was a great time, but it's like the infrastructure of the Pistons is awful. I don't want to get traded there, especially as a vet. Now, if I'm Tobias Harris and I'm on an expiring contract, I'm actually really pissed now because the 76ers are contending and I'm going to the worst team of all time. But it's just going to be interesting. What do you give up? You have, how many, 9 lottery picks on your roster right now? It might be more than 9. I ain't doing the math. It's a lot of lottery picks. Now, some of those lottery picks are not good, but you have a lot of lottery picks on your roster right now. You just need some players that can actually contribute. And my favorite rumor of them all, the Knicks are showing interest in Malcolm Brogdon. That is the type of trade. Now, I know that there's rumors about the Knicks wanting to go get the next star, so on and so forth. Having Malcolm Brogdon on this current roster, and I'm assuming in order to get Malcolm Brogdon, it's Evan Fournier and a they have a bunch of picks that are not like super valuable. So maybe it's two of those least valuable first round picks. Because again, we're talking about least valuable ones. One of them might turn into 2 seconds down the line. Malcolm Brogdon on this team. This is a team that already has so many steady players, in my opinion. Malcolm Brogdon is as steady as it gets without being a star or even like, this guy won 6 Man of the Year last year for the people that don't remember. And I just like his leadership. When before the season started, of course, Scoot Henderson is now not starting anymore. But before the season started, he was asked about coming off the bench for Scoot Henderson, and he welcomed it with open arms. Just talking about, man, this guy's the future of the organization. I can completely understand why he would start over me. And again, he just came off the bench in Boston, and he was okay. And I feel as though if the Knicks can pull that trigger and get him, that levels them up another tier. Because since I'm still watching every single Knicks game since the OG Anunoby trade, it's been beautiful. It's been great. And I still don't believe OG's number has been called one time in 4 games. Right place, right time. Raptors fans will tell you that in the last month or so, OG Anunoby had taken his foot off the gas defensively, kind of expecting that he will get traded. That's back up. Where he, again, is looking like one of the best defensive players in basketball. And you add Malcolm Brogdon, everybody's going to be motivated to win. And they will be a very, very good case study to the question that Becky Hammond was brought to about Jalen Brunson being a 1A. Because if you pull off a trade with Malcolm Brogdon where you don't lose any of your core pieces, right? You still have everybody else outside of Evan Fournier and maybe some draft capital. That team is as complete with, again, Mitchell Robinson's out for the season, but as complete as you can be without having a top 10 to 15 player in basketball. So I'm just very curious to see what that would look like. Isaiah Hartenstein has been phenomenal. I know I just said that missing Mitchell Robinson sucks, which it does, but Isaiah Hartenstein has done an amazing job, taking the reins as a starting center. All hustle, all heart, and all the time, Now it's time for my favorite segment, Ask KB, where you can hit me up on Twitter or in the comment section of these episodes using the hashtag ASKKB and send questions my way, and I'll try my best to answer my favorite ones. Okay, the first one comes from Maddox, also known as Joe Mazzulla. Let's grind. Okay. How would you go about watching and keeping up with the NBA when you don't have a lot of time to do so? I'd like to do something like talking basketball, like you do later down the line. Just don't have a lot of time to watch games every day with school and sports. Now, Maddox, this is what I would say to you, my boy. It is extremely hard to do that when you have a full schedule. I didn't really get to watching NBA on a nightly basis, keeping up with all of the ins and outs and being ear to the ground and a lot of stuff until after I was done with school and all of those things. If you look at when my channels kind of existed as being a guy that's talking hoops, it was well after I had stopped going to college because I had so much more time. And the time is the number one thing that you lose when you in a business like this, because on a traditional day, 6 o'clock Central Time comes around, I am in my chair or sometimes living room, just one of the few spots across the house watching basketball. So time is the best thing you can have. But if, in this case, where you don't have it, my number one recommendation is to listen to other people that have that time, right? You're already doing an okay job at listening to the Kenny Beecham podcast. I'll just say that. But there's so many people that do this full time. So many people in specific markets that do this full time that you can kind of piece together things that you've missed just by listening to them. Now, I'm not saying listen to them and rip what they're saying, but like if you've missed a full slate of games one night, I recommend going to listen to No Dunks. No Dunks, Monday through Friday, they walk you through what happened the previous night. That'll keep your ear to the ground. That was what I was actually listening to them. No, they were the starters back in the day when I was in college, but listen to them every single day, because I was not watching every single day. I would also recommend going into statistics, even the free ones, Basketball Reference, all these other places. You can really get a hang of what's working and what's not. And again, I wouldn't say that's the end all be all, but statistics do a lot. And the last thing is be well read. I mentioned people doing podcasts or doing YouTube videos about stuff, but there are a lot of great writers that'll keep you up to date as well. I don't think you need to be watching basketball for 5 hours a day to be ear to the ground. Now, when it comes to you starting to make content, you're probably going to have to sacrifice a little bit of time, but I'm not telling you to quit your sport. I'm not telling you to drop out of school. Let that be your priority first. And then once that is done and that is run its course, then you transition to the other stuff. The next question comes from Steven. You bored of hoops yet? I coach and train basketball every day and I'm bored. Learn to love the boringness, and that's a separator for me lately. Am I bored of hoops yet? The answer is maybe a little. Maybe a little. Bored in the sense that like sometimes I see a slate of games and I don't get as excited as I did in October. And I think that's just because we're in the dog days of the NBA season. The time between Christmas and the trade deadline is always sluggish, if you ask me. And I think that's where I'm at right now. But I also think that nobody's job, in this case, again, part of this is my job. Nobody's job is 100% the thing that they enjoy all the time. There are a lot of things about my job that I don't enjoy. I'm not complaining about it because I love the other stuff, but like sometimes in this, when I have a bad slate of games or slate of games I'm not really interested in, and I'm bored of it, if you want to call it that. I just recognize that like in order for me to do the part that I like, which is recording videos and talking about it, I have to do the boring part, which is watching the random game on January 8th that may or may not mean anything. So am I bored of it? Maybe a little bit, but not in a sense that it's preventing me from being productive or preventing me from enjoying the parts that I do enjoy, if that makes sense. Before we get out of here, you know it's got to come back. Y'all seem to be enjoying, whether you agree or disagree, you seem to be enjoying producer Greg's eye test takes. I did read through all of the comments last time, and they were saying that Greg had some cold takes. And I love that because I think that some of his takes are very polarizing. So we're going to bring in Greg for another edition of Greg's eye test takes. Yeah, that's what we called it. How you feeling today, Greg?
I'm doing great, ready to do this. So I only got two for you today. Okay. The first one I think has been kind of a brewing topic for a while now, but I'm not sure if it still has any steam. But the NBA should get rid of conferences and just seed the playoffs 1 through 16.
Okay. I feel where you're coming from, right? I think that the brand of ball could just be better in most cases, but I think that the reason why we will probably never get that is it's just going to be too taxing for the travel aspect. Hypothetically, we get New York Knicks versus Golden State Warriors in round 1, and now they have a 6-hour flight both ways. Also, I think it gets rid of some of the potential rivalries that we could have, man. I know we don't have a ton of them actively in the association, but the few that we really have kind of stem from playoffs, right? Whether it be Bucks versus Celtics, that's a playoff one. And I think that because we basically just be having this Wild West, if you will, of different things, we don't have a lot of, it's just a little bit too much variety, and that doesn't bear well for rivalry. So my question is, what made you think this was a good idea?
Well, to counter that for a second in terms of player travel, I mean, these dudes are on private jets. Mm-hmm. They have all the comforts in the world. They have, massage therapists on every team. I'm not too worried about their bodies in that sense. And then for me, I just think about like 2017, 2018 Rockets Warriors. They're the two best teams in the NBA that should have been the NBA Finals. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, that's what it really comes down to. Is it at the end of the season, it should be the two best teams regardless of conference. I think that's what nags at me the most.
I didn't think about it from that perspective. I feel where you're coming from. I'm trying to think about recent years. I guess last year, was it the two best teams? I guess in that point it was, with the Heat doing what they were doing. I want to say I don't feel like recently we've had a ton of this conference finals is the real NBA finals, if you will. I think a lot of that was probably, again, like you mentioned, the Kevin Durant Warriors versus Houston Rockets. We knew that Bron and them were coming out east, but they weren't really going to win that series. I see what you're saying. I just think it's just a little bit too far for me to agree with.
There was also a stretch in the 2010s where the West every year was just so much deeper and stronger than the East, where you would have teams, I think there was a few years where teams under 500 from the East made the playoffs, mm-hmm. and maybe teams over 500 in the West didn't.
Yep.
And this would address that as well.
Yeah, I see that. I think there was the not infamous, but the famous Suns team. In the 2013-2014 season, the Suns won 48 games and missed the playoffs completely. So in that case, yes, that's a team that should be in the playoffs. But that's also an anomaly. It doesn't happen as often as it might seem. So I'm still going to say I don't agree with that one.
All right. Second one. This one might be a bit contentious. Luka Doncic right now is equally as good, if not better, than peak James Harden was.
Whew, you're going to get some Rockets fans really upset with you. James Harden's stan culture is real. But But Greg, I subscribe to this. I subscribe to this idea. As someone that I feel like personally I've undervalued Luka on a night in, night out basis. I think part of that is because we're just so used to what Luka Doncic is doing that it just becomes another day at the office. But if you take a step back and you think about the surrounding pieces he's been playing with for the course of his career, it's not great. And he's continuously been, of course, I know last year they missed it, but continuously been in the playoffs and elevated his play come playoff time. Now, of course, James got his MVP award. That's something that Luka's still really looking for. But they're very similar in the sense that they are able to make a lot out of nothing or close to nothing in their primes. Like you look at some of those James Harden teams, of course, we got Chris Paul. But other than that, we're talking Eric Gordon, who was good, or PJ Tucker, who was solid. But for the most part, the team wasn't amazing. But they also won 60 plus games a few times. That I think that might be the one pushback, is that we haven't seen Luka just dominate a season in a sense that they're the 1 seed or 2 seed. And James did that a few times in his prime. But as far as carrying the load of one of the top offenses in basketball, they're like 1A, 1B. I'll give a slight nod to like the MVP version of James, just because they were able to win so much more regular season games versus Luka. And again, that team took the greatest team of all time to like a real series. I'm going to always say that, like a real series where you thought about like, man, can Steph Curry and KD and them lose? The answer is no, but it was very, very close. As always, this is a fluid conversation. Leave a comment down below what you agree or disagree with, whether it be the eye test, whether it be us talking Warriors, us talking trades and rumors. All of it is a fluid conversation. You can hit me up on X2 or Twitter at KOT4Q. I appreciate you watching or listening to this entire episode. You are the real MVP, and I'll see y'all in a couple days.